Good evening. I want to welcome everyone to the City of Dublin Architectural Review Board meeting. This meeting is being live streamed, so if you want to see videos of this meeting and past meetings, or if you want to attend any of our future meetings virtually, you can access the live stream by the city's website. For those of you who are watching live streaming now, the meeting's held at 5555 Perimeter Drive in the city's council chambers. The meeting procedure for each case this evening will begin with a staff presentation, followed by an opportunity for the applicant to make a presentation. The board will then have the opportunity to ask clarifying questions, first of the staff and then of the applicant. Then we will open it up for public comments, and we do welcome public comments in the cases. And then finally, the board will deliberate on each case. We start all of our meetings with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if everyone would rise and face the flag. This evening, we have some members to be sworn in, and Councilman Keeler is going to provide the oath of office.
Thank you. You want me to sit?
Councilman Keeler is now going to reappoint Michael Jewell, or swear in Michael Jewell.
Solemnly swear that I will faithfully execute the duties as a member of the Architectural Review Board of the City of Dublin, and will, to the best of my
Thank you, Councilman. By the way, Councilman Keeler is one of our city council members who's been a part of this board. We're, our interest and the interests of the resident in the residents in the district are well represented in the city council. Many of you may not be aware, at least 3 of the current council members have been members of the Architectural Review Board at one time. So. Lori, would you call the roll, please?
Mr. Alexander,
Here?
Mr. Cotter,
Here.
Ms. Cooper,
Here.
Mr. Jewell,
Here.
and Ms. Damiser.
Here.
I want to introduce one guest we have with us tonight. Jesse Schomp is one of our legal advisors, so he's sitting in the meeting with us tonight. He hasn't been here before, so we welcome him to the meeting.
Thank you. Good to be with you all.
We have an administrative matter that we need to address as a board, so we're going to adjourn for a moment, and we'll be back shortly. Our guidelines require us every April to select a new chair or select a chair and a vice chair for the committee. So I will ask, is there a motion to nominate an individual for the role of vice chair?
I make a motion to elect Sean Cotter as the role of ARB Vice Chair during the term of April 2022 through March 2023.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Lori, could we have a roll?
Mr. Alexander,
Yes?
Mr. Cotter,
Yes.
Ms. Damiser,
Yes.
Ms. Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. Jewell.
Yes.
Now, could I have a motion from the board to elect one of us in the role of chair for the coming year?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to elect Gary Alexander for the role of ARB Chair during the term of April 2022 through March 2023.
I'll second that.
Ms. Damiser,
Yes.
Mr. Cotter,
Yes.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes?
Mr. Jewell,
Yes.
Ms. Cooper.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you all. All right, now is our acceptance of documents and approval of the meeting minutes. Is there a motion to accept the documents in the record and approve the minutes from the meeting held on March 23rd?
I'll make a motion to go ahead and accept the documents in the record for minutes from the meeting held on March 23rd, 2021.
I'll second.
Ms. Cooper?
Yes.
Ms. Damisar?
I'm going to abstain. I was not at the last meeting.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes?
Mr. Cotter?
Yes.
Mr. Jewell?
Yes.
Okay. Our board is responsible for the review of construction and modifications or alterations to any site in the area subject to architectural review under the provision of Zoning Code Section 153.170. The board has a decision-making responsibility on these cases. Anyone who intends to address the board on any cases this evening must be sworn in. So if you will raise your right hand. Please answer in the affirmative. Do you swear to affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth in your testimony to this board? Okay, I think we heard you all. Right. Okay. There are no cases eligible for our consent agenda tonight, so we'll start with the new cases. The first case is 143 South Riverview Street. This is for the demolition. The application is a request for the demolition of a single-story, single-family home located on a .21-acre site, zoned Historic District, Historic Residential. The site is south of the intersection of South Riverview Street with Penny Hill Lane. Ms. Holt will be our presenter, and Sarah, it looks like you're ready to go.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, board members. This is case 22035. It is a demolition request at 143 South Riverview Street. The site is on the west side of South Riverview Street. It's south of Penny Hill Lane, and it is zoned Historic District, Historic Residential. This is a closer view showing the existing house and the detached garage. And again, the house is requested to be demolished tonight. These photos show the existing house, which was built in 1949. It's an example of minimal traditional architecture found to be contributing through the historic and cultural assessment in the 5 areas of location, design, feeling, setting, and association. And Preservation Designs Limited commented on this particular request at our request and found the building to be contributing in all 7 categories, including materials and workmanship. Some project history, just to remind you where we have been previously. In November of 2021, the applicants had an informal request for demolition and new home construction. The demolition information at that time was not complete, and the board encouraged the applicants to explore a sympathetic addition at that time. Tonight, all information has been supplied, and it is only for the demolition request. This is the site plan from the previously submitted informal review, and it shows the new house, which again, we're not considering tonight, but it does provide some pertinent information. There's a historic stone wall along the south side of the property line, and this may be one of the oldest stone walls in town. The applicant states it's 6 feet from the existing house. And then here, highlighted, we see landmark tree number 790. It's a 28-inch walnut tree that is tagged specifically. Staff requested information from the applicant about how the existing stone wall would be protected during the demolition, and they plan to install fencing of some kind to protect it. The applicants or the owners supplied these photos and state that it's 158 feet long. These are the overall demolition criteria that we use for contributing structures. And we'll go through each one of these in detail along with the staff analysis. So first we have, will all economically viable use be deprived without the demolition? We believe this criteria is not met because the house has increased in value since the purchase in 2017. The house is habitable and in good condition per supplied photos and the structural analysis. And for example, we will point out here there's no indication of rot or termites, no penetrations in the floor joists for electrical or plumbing, and all of the members appear to be dry and clean and straight. The PDL also mentioned that there was no evidence of any kind of racking or settling in these photographs as well. The second criteria is, will reasonable investment-backed expectations be maintained without demolition? The owners can explore an addition similar to that recently approved by this board at 94 Franklin Street. This project was also a minimal traditional home with a detached garage on a similar sized lot. The applicants presented 2 letters from different banks, and they each deny loans that are based upon massive renovations. Those were not presented for appropriateness or comparison with the plans presented at informal review. And National Equity Fund is a, quote, leading nonprofit low-income housing tax credit syndicator, according to their website. The next criteria is, was an economic hardship created or exacerbated by the owner? The applicants state that they have maintained their property, which is very true. The information from Albanese Construction states that a line item includes $125,000 for foundation work. This foundation work is not necessary with a historically appropriate addition per Preservation Designs Limited. This cost would suggest a second story as stated in the structural assessment, but the applicant says that they did not pursue that. Additionally, this cost estimate does not include any demolition costs for the current property. So we don't have a complete picture of what the true cost comparison is. Oops. Looking further into the economic hardship issue as it relates to foundation costs, the owner excavated portions of the foundation, and comments were made by Criterium Liskay engineers advising that building on top of the existing foundation would not be a positive thing to do. And staff agrees from a preservation appropriateness standpoint, as discussed at the November 21 hearing, that probably would not meet the intent of the design guidelines. But we disagree on the end result, where the existing foundation is doing its job as intended for a single-story home. Code does not require reconstruction of an entire foundation if the original house is not disturbed, and this option is open to the homeowners with a sympathetic addition. Therefore, this expense or desire may be self-imposed. Looking at the current level of economic return, the Franklin County Auditor shows that the home was purchased on May 18th of 2017, and Zillow, as of the 4th of April, showed 127% increase or in the value of the home. The property has not been listed for sale or rent that we could find since the 2017 purchase. And regarding the feasibility of alternative uses or approaches, because the property will remain residential per the code and the community plan. So we're really not looking for alternative uses. We're looking at alternative approaches here. Again, the applicants were encouraged to pursue a sympathetic addition, and that's not been presented for evaluation and determination. As previously noted, the structural analysis and the cost estimate appear to add a second story per the language in the structural engineer's email. And then the cost estimate is missing the demolition costs. There is no evidence of a self-created hardship for inadequate maintenance. The house is in good condition. The owners state that they did not know of the landmark designation at the time of purchase. This property has always been zoned historic residential since the creation of the historic district. Here we see the labels that were required for the 2020 update to the code and the guidelines. And it shows that mailings were sent specifically to these owners. We also have the labels that were created in 2017 for an unrelated project, but within the historic district, that were sent to these owners, and that was 5 months after their purchase. And then the Franklin County Auditor has the historic district designations on their website. And we do not know if there are any economic incentives or funding available for this project. So based on our analysis and the expert opinion of Preservation Designs Limited, staff is recommending disapproval of the demolition request with the following findings. The structure is an excellent example of minimal traditional architecture and is found to be contributing in 5 of 7 indicators on the historic and cultural assessment and 7 of 7 according to Preservation Designs. The applicant has not provided evidence that an appropriate alternative to demolition has been explored. Options range from a sympathetic addition to selling the property. The provided supporting structural information indicates that the foundation is in good condition and appropriate for the current loads. Conflicting information has been provided regarding the need and/or expense of unnecessary foundation work. The provided supporting structural information indicates that the roof framing is in good condition. The accompanying photos of the floor joists also appear in good condition. The lot is large enough to accept a building addition to the back of the existing structure, and this was encouraged at the November 21 board hearing. The proposed addition, for which the applicant obtained a cost estimate and loan reviews, has not been presented to staff or the board to determine its similarity in size and scope to the November 21 submittal, so it cannot be evaluated as a direct comparison relative to cost, nor its appropriateness relative to the code and the guidelines. The cost estimates are incomplete, lacking separate demolition information, new home construction costs, and renovation of the existing home with the accompanying plans. And finally, the property has been zoned historic residential since at least 2014, and the Planning Division has confirmation that the owners were notified of changes in both 2017 and 2020, and the Franklin County Assessor website states the property is within the Dublin Historic District. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any initial questions for Sarah? I'm sure we'll come back with some.
No, we'll be back.
Okay. Would the applicants like to speak? Ms. Lyon, I'm assuming?
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Lindy Lyon, and I live at 143 South Riverview Street. I'm formerly known as Lindy Slinger. When I grew up here, I was born and raised in Dublin. Other than college years at Miami of Ohio, I've lived here essentially my entire life. After I graduated college and before I became a mom, I owned and operated a personal training studio in Dublin here for nearly a decade. I love this community with my whole heart. I'm a huge believer in the Dublin difference and that this community is truly set apart from all the rest. I could not be more proud to live here in the original Dublin village, deeply rooted and rich in its 19th century historic significance. My husband and I, we bought our house in 2017, just a few months before we had our son. It had previously been a rental property, and it was in pretty rough shape. So there was a lot of work to be done in order to prepare for a family and specifically a new baby. But we were ecstatic to be able to find a home that we could afford in this area, let alone one on the idyllic Riverview Street. It was and has been small and humble beginnings, but one with big prayers and dreams to eventually make our forever home, one we could proudly pass down in our family line. When we bought our home in 2017, we were never told, not once, not in any form or fashion, that our home had been flagged recommended contributing to the historic value of the area. Nothing was presented at the time of the sale or to the realtor or title company or any time after regarding such a thing. The assessment was said to be done in 2016, which means even the former owner would have been notified of this. And she has stated she never was. In fact, she had plans of her own to tear down the house and build a new one. She found the process too much for an undertaking at her later stage in life, and that was the reason she decided to sell. I just want to highlight and emphasize that we were never notified of any unique status that would prohibit us in such a severe way with our property. And if we had been made known, we probably would have never purchased it. I'll never forget the day we were told by staff that our house was marked as recommended contributing. It was August 11th, 2021, 9:30 a.m. Yes, over 4 years after we had purchased our home, we had scheduled a meeting with staff to discuss the scope of our completed new build architecture plans. It was at that meeting that staff asked to see our architecture plans and images for the future home exterior, all normal stuff, which was followed by a statement along the lines of, "Oh, that looks good. I don't foresee the board having any issues with that. But there's just one other thing," as they slid the cultural assessment individual property sheet across the table. To say we were in absolute shock is an understatement of the century. They may as well have said, "But you're screwed." Before I responded to some of the things staff mentioned in the presentation regarding financial hardship, I just want to explain our house situation. It is a one-story, 1,100 square foot concrete block house. It was built in 1949 with a small, probably 100 square foot addition in the back that was most likely added in the 70s when the aluminum siding was added to our house. And it is a very janky add-on. It has its own heating system that we've never turned on for fear it will burn our entire house down. To call our house exceptionally important is a far cry, considering it isn't actually associated with any historic event. It's not a battleground or military base of post-World War II or associated with the life of a significant person, and it doesn't represent the work of a master builder in any sense. Originally, it had only 5 of the integrity markers, which were highly debatable, and now all of a sudden, well, they were debatable and subjective, and now all of a sudden it has 7. The historic wall is a completely and separate entity, not even affiliated with the same time period, and can't be used in hopes to build a case for the historic significance of our house. Besides, the wall will be preserved. In response to staff's presentation and recommendation that you do not vote in favor of our demo, I'd like to address a few things briefly that were mentioned. The main one being, we are not required in any capacity to submit architectural plans for a renovation addition for a demolition request. It is not required by code for a demolition hearing. And from my research, every demo that has been approved, no architectural drawings for renovation and additions are submitted. In regards to the structural engineer report, his report was actually completely inconclusive because he was not able to access the area needed to properly assess the foundation of the house. The access is like 17 inches, and he is protected by a union that says he cannot go under there, even though they are $500 an hour for a structural engineer. And Ms. Cram told me that you can pay anybody to get under there. Well, you can't. He would not go under there. he suggested digging holes under certain areas of the structure to try to get an idea of what the foundation was like. Based on that evidence of the holes, he was able to confidently say a second story would not be feasible. We never said anything about a second story to him. We never asked, can we build up? He was just saying, based off the pictures, he could confidently say it was not in good enough shape for a second story. His professional advice was that without lifting the home, that would be cost $15,000 to $20,000, there wasn't any way to truly know what condition the foundation was in. That was his actual report, which leads me to staff's concern over the renovation and addition estimate. It was noted that if we are prohibited to add up on our existing structure, then the cost estimate for the foundation modifications are deemed unnecessary. However, based on the inconclusiveness of our structural engineer report, we have no idea what we're getting into once we start renovating. We simply have no assurance the foundation will not require extensive finances and restoration. As far as the lending letters are concerned, National Equity Fund is a lending line focused on acquisition and construction lending, and Huntington Bank is one of the largest lenders around. You know, there are a lot of things that I could say about this, but I guess the one thing that I'm struggling with is that the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966 was established, which established the basis for the National Register of Historic Places, as you know, was passed primarily to protect our nation's heritage from rampant federal development, meaning saving public landmarks, as the original case was concerning the demolition of Penn Station in New York City. I don't think it was ever intended to oppress and limit residential property owners the way it's being used now over us in our specific instance. Over the past few years in America, we have seen countless foundational historic statues torn down and removed with little consequence, and we're being put through the ringer for having full ownership over our tiny concrete box. It seems we are being told that there's all this public benefit and public value to our home, but there isn't any public finances or funding available for our financial hardship, for any financial hardship we may incur due to the structure's recommended contributing status. I am painfully aware of how our case has been presented to you tonight. If it were up to Preservation Designs Limited or staff, our case probably would have never seen the day of light. But the board has the authority that rules over our unique situation, over each unique situation. And I'm sure I should be completely intimidated out of coming up here or discouraged out of my mind, but I feel like I have every right to stand up here and fight for a decision that will ultimately affect my family's future and no one else's regarding our own property. We want to build a nice home for our family and one that fits the character and quality of the incredible area we live in, appropriate in size and scale, and working with the board to ensure that that is truly the end result. That's all I have to say.
Okay. Do any of you have any initial questions for the applicant?
None. I don't have any. No, thank you.
Oh, good. Other than thank you. That was
No,
very,
thank
very
you.
articulate.
No, thank you for your time.
So I'm gonna ask you a few questions.
Okay.
And first of all, I do want to clarify a couple of things that, just to add, every project where we have approved demolition recently, we've seen designs for a new building. So
You've seen what? I'm sorry.
We've seen designs for a new building.
Designs?
So everything that's come before this board for demolition has had a design with it. So
A design for the future build, not necessarily for renovations and additions. I know for certain that 110, 112, that is diagonal to me, that was voted, never had to produce any because it's not a demand of the road.
not for renovations because they had adequate structural, and they had very different structural evidence than you've been able to present or your engineers have been able to present that would be visible above the foundation, that would not require one to get into the foundation. Because you, just to go into some of the details, since you've said things weren't, you suggested things weren't done correctly. Each one of those projects showed us we knew there were foundation problems because there were problems in the rest of the building as a result of the foundation. So in your case, there has been no evidence yet presented to suggest, what's been suggested is your foundation is not built to current code. That's very clear from the photos, but that's the case of many, many structures. What's been suggested is there are voids in your foundation, also very, very common. But those voids have not led to cracks up above in the structure. We haven't seen any cracks. They haven't resulted in evident deflections. So that's evidence that those other cases were able to show, and so their demolition was approved, and we could see the condition of the building, and they met the other guidelines, and we did not ask them for drawings for how they would renovate, because they met the standards for demolition. Okay, because at your last meeting, you did not meet the standards for demolition at that time.
Well, we didn't even know that. We just knew it was an informal meeting. We didn't know that there was even a...
Well, and you can come back as many times as you
Yeah.
want. So what your suggestion here that you want the right to speak, you always have the right to speak. You can come back as many times as you
Yeah.
want. So a lot of people come with incomplete information initially. And that's fine. That's fine. But that's why it was suggested that maybe you look at renovations, because here's the question for all of us, I think. And one of the things I wanted to ask you,
Yeah.
we see this substantial price for renovating this building. We don't know what we see numbers that that's based on, but we don't know what the design is that that's based on. I think Ms. Holt was accurate. She made the assumption that based on what the engineers said, there's some thought about going up.
Yes.
Okay. But there are a lot of ways to add to the structure that would not result in the price that you showed us. So that's why having more evidence of, or just an example of what your proposal was that led to that price would be helpful. And here's where I'm going with that
Yeah.
question. Usually when you work with a design professional, they bring you options and alternatives for how to meet your goals. Did you explore other options that would not result in in a project the cost of what you shared with us?
No. My main reason is for not providing plans, a renovation in addition, is because it felt like we were told that, gosh, I want to make sure I say it correctly, that, we were told that we needed to use an architect of the staff selection, is what we were told in our private meeting. And we had already interviewed lots of architects, Dublin architects, and we had, it's a free market. We decided on who we wanted to be our architect and award the opportunity to. We developed a relationship with, and they were in our budget. That's all I'm saying. So the fear is you're not requesting something, and then we're not asking to add on, but we're told we need to use an architect of, the staff's selection, not knowing how much they'll cost, not knowing what you guys will say or how many times we'll have to go back and pay for, adjusting things. It just seems like it's like a process where you have to have an extended amount of money to prove financial hardship.
Okay.
It seems a little unfair.
I'm going to make one comment
Okay.
because I know, and then I'm going to ask staff to respond to your
Okay.
comment. I know when you came to us before,
Yes.
the board suggested you work with a design professional that's worked in historic districts. And we said you could even look around in this community and see projects that have been approved.
Mm-hmm.
So those are people who know the code and also have experience working. You don't have to.
Yeah, I mean, if they're outside of your budget, then no one can mandate that you use somebody like that. I mean, it's our property.
Well, I think the goal is to find a way to reach both of our goals. To find a design that's compatible
Yes.
with our standards.
Yes.
And also find a design that meets your goals.
I
And
do-
so there
I
are
do
design
agree.
professionals that can do that.
I do agree. It just seems like all the power and control with no accountability is given to one side, and we're at the mercy of possibly a process that's the less you show, the better, because it's like a fixed process where they do not want you to succeed.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry you have that impression, but I'll let Ms. Holt respond to your one comment.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We, in our last meeting, which I believe was early December, sat with the Lyons, and we recommended, as the board did, to seek a designer/architect that did have experience in a historic district. As public servants, we take very seriously the concept that we cannot recommend specific designers, architects, engineers, contractors of any type.
All right, well, you have.
Okay,
you
I'm
have
like, we
different-
were told specifically we needed to use one of the architects. That was.
I can't, I mean,
Okay,
you
I'm
have
just-
different,
I'm
you have
just
different
telling-
impressions and
presenting it
different
from our case.
perceptions.
This is our only place we have a voice then.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. Okay, before we get into, because we're going to have a lot of discussion here, I think, amongst ourselves. Does anyone else have any initial comments for the applicant? Okay. Excuse me, I know in terms of the public comment, we've had one very favorable response to the proposal.
We actually have had 3, and let me read them into the record. Jane Corrali from 179 South Riverview called me today. She is in favor of the demolition as long as the final result complies with code and guidelines. We received an email from the Schwankes. Hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. They say, we live next door to the north of the house at 143 South Riverview Street that is up for discussion for demolition. We are in full support of the owner's plans to demolish the current home to build another home for their family. Since we moved into our home almost 10 years ago, we have watched multiple demolitions on this street with large houses built in their place, and we fail to see why the owners at 143 should be expected to remodel while others were granted a demolition. Additionally, the existing home does not fit into a historic aesthetic matching other homes, in parentheses, including new builds, in this area, so we fail to see why maintaining the current home would be expected. The family making this request has lived in this home for almost 5 years. They are outstanding neighbors and committed to the mission of the Historic District of Dublin. Their current home is too small for their growing family, and it would be a terrible shame to lose such high-quality Dublin residents because they cannot build an appropriate home for their family. Please feel free to reach out to us with any questions, clarifications, or concerns. And then I have one more that just came in. This is for from Trevor Vessels at 63 South Riverview. He is writing in strong support of the applicant's plans. This is a no-brainer when taking into account the other homes the ARB has recently approved. I cannot fathom why this project is a concern. The applicant's plans for demolition and replacement of this property are tasteful and will fit in the neighborhood perfectly. I simply cannot understand how their cinder block structure is deemed contributing when 3 years ago this same board allowed me to tear down a cinder block garage that you deemed non-contributing. The end result of non-approval may be a family forced to leave a neighborhood where they want to raise their family. This is unfortunate and shouldn't happen. The ridiculous part is that had the applicants just ignored their home and let it fall into disrepair, like the homes on North Riverview, I suspect the board would be much more inclined to approve. I hope that common sense takes over here and allows the demolition of this home so our neighbors can stay where they want to be and where we'd all like them.
Is there anyone here who wishes to speak to this? Come on up.
My name is Pete Albanese. I live at 4181 Macduff Way. I'm Lindy and Brad's builder. I'm also part of their family. I'm the one that put most of that bid together that you saw. And I wanted to take a second to explain a few things about the foundation on that home. We talked about remodeling, and number one, in the pictures that you'd seen, there was a depth given to the bottom of the footer on that home. It's 28 inches. and code is 36. So anything I go in to do, I've got to lower it down. So anything that we hit or fix on the inside means I've got to adjust or fix on the outside. The other major issue in this area, it's all rock. There is no bringing a hoe in and digging down. That just doesn't happen. So when you have to bring multiple pieces of equipment in to put this foundation in, to add on to it, to adjust it, to put piers in to pick up design loads that we would have to do, that takes a lot of effort, a lot of money, and I've got a stone wall that we're trying to preserve 6 feet from the house. So when we put the bid together and we tried to be, I don't know, consistent or whatever, it was done with the thought in mind that we're going to run into more than just what we have, what we show, what we've been. Because whenever you remodel or go through this, you're going to run into problems that are outside of what we can actually do. That being said, that original bid was done at the end of November, beginning of December. I'm a builder. Prices go up on everything every 60 days. Everything. Concrete, wood, everything. It just goes, it's crazy. And it's actually crushing our industry, not having workers, not having all the stuff that we need to get these jobs done. So to put a bid in and come out with, you know, $125,000 for a foundation repair and try to make sure that that works, I would say that if I'm not right in there to get it done, it's going to be more. So we try to be as fair as we could and with them, because, you know, we're trying to make sure that they can get into the home. You know, we are from Dublin, and we try to make sure that they can stay there too. I've been to that house. I can't see personally how that can be a historic home. It's the only one that just doesn't look historic, is what I should probably say to you guys. I mean, when you go through the neighborhood, it's like, wow, okay, that looks good, that looks good. And then you come to this thing, it's like, no, that's not historic. There's no way that siding's historic. Those windows are historic. Those doors are historic. There's nothing about it. I mean, it's hard for me to comprehend to go down that street and look at all those homes, and then I come to that house, and I see the same thing that everybody else sees that goes through that neighborhood, and they probably go, what is up with that? And, you know, it's not updated. I know that if we would pay enough money to a structural engineer, to anybody, they could go in and they could find something that's wrong with the home. You know, and I don't think personally that's fair. I mean, we're trying to do this all on a budget. And when she says she's trying to hire the right type of architect, we are. Because they could go from tens of thousands of dollars through the roof. You know, they just don't have that kind of money. So we thought that this whole process would be a lot, like that guy said in one of her emails, more common sense. And I truly believe that this is it's a bad deal for them. If they have to stay with where they are, you know, I don't even see how that's possible. But that's all I got.
Okay. Thank you. Anybody else? Okay. All right, board members. And if it's easier, we can start with the items that have been identified as our grounds to approve demolition.
Yeah, I'm going to go down to the code. It's probably easier.
So I think that first question is, will all economically viable uses of the property be deprived without demolition?
I mean, I can start. Certainly, I mean, if I just look at it, not knowing all the details and what we see from just from the pictures and how it's presented, I mean, I think there are other uses, right? I mean, you could renovate, you could add on to the back. So I'm not sure that I see how that there's no other, will all economically viable uses be deprived without demolition? I don't see exactly how that is met. I mean, okay, you can leave it, you can add onto the back, or you could repair it. And certainly, without knowing more, I mean, from the construction side, what is the thing that makes it so it doesn't work? It is very difficult from what was presented inside the packet.
I agree. I actually saw no evidence from the applicants in response to that claim that there are economically viable alternatives. I know selling sounds harsh, but there was no evidence that it's unsellable. There's no evidence that you couldn't do the extension on the back. I'd want to see some evidence on the other side responding.
Yeah, and I think we've been so focused on the foundation issue, seems to be the foundation of everything I'm hearing today, but really liking to see, has there been other thoughts and ideas that have been, that we have done in other locations and being able to make that work. It just seems like we're so focused on this foundation, and based on the pictures we see, yeah, we don't see any structural issues. It's the unknown that we don't know what's down underneath there, but I don't see any. It just seems like that's the biggest part of the focus, and I'd like to see more of like conceptual ideas of other things that could have been thought about. I think we're not thinking outside the box yet. That's just my personal opinion. I just think we're so wrapped up on the one item that, and I understand, Brad and Lindy, where you guys are coming from. It's a family, it's a home, and you want something to grow with there. But I just, living on this just being the foundation, I just need more information.
Marty, do you have any feelings on this?
I guess I also echo those concerns because we had talked at the last meeting about how the front could be preserved relatively and a subordinate addition could be made. And we also discussed the opportunity to bring in very informal designs to talk about it, to get more ideas on how to address this. And that was established by our record and our notes from that hearing in November. So I appreciate your frustration and your concerns, but we do have a code and we do have requirements that have to be met. And so for us to properly serve the city, we have to follow those guidelines, and that's the limit of our abilities.
And I concur with those sentiments. In German Village, there are the same issues with 1.5-story structures that are very old and have foundation issues and have all kinds of problems. And what's evolved as a way of meeting design guidelines and adapting those homes is significant additions at the rear of those properties. And so there is a way to minimize the cost by putting the dollars in the new construction, still retain the original building, and at least retain the character of the streetscape. So I think there are, and that was part of the reason for the comment we made, and we've all made, encouraging you to seek design professionals who can help you do this, because there are clearly ways that you could add to that structure and significantly, and not have those numbers, and I do this too every day, not have those numbers that we saw in that cost estimate. And there are benefits. Foundation on stone is a stable foundation. So even though the foundation is shallow in some areas of the existing house, that foundation will not heave. And so issues with frost line are very different when you build on stone than when you build on earth. So, it doesn't mean the house can't be used. It doesn't mean your foundation is a problem. There's not enough evidence to even suggest that foundation is a problem for you. So I find, from an architectural point of view, and also what our code states, I don't see how this criteria is met. This first criteria. And the second question is, will reasonable is there reasonable investment-backed excavations to be maintained without the demolition?
Again, it's a bit difficult to see without knowing what demo is and then what it could look like if we say we're going to take the position that there could be an out-of-the-box view of what it could look like. I think as Gary just said, it's kind of hard to say what it could look like or what it could turn into, looking at it from a different angle. I mean, it could be, as you say, you come back and say there's certain things that can't be done, but today it's kind of hard because with the numbers that we've seen and trying to understand what thinking outside the box is if there's something not done with the foundations, it's just hard to say that you can answer that question in the affirmative, that you couldn't find an economical way that it could be backed by a mortgage. So I can't say yes or no because it's difficult with the numbers that I have today. So today I wouldn't be able to say, but it would be difficult to rationalize that it couldn't be that way.
Anyone have any other feelings about item 2? Okay. I think it's clear you didn't create, if there is an economic hardship, it wasn't created by you. So that criteria, I don't think we need to discuss any further. We are, whether or not you think this house is a great example of the particular architectural style, that's kind of beyond our ability to address formally because of the standards that have been established in the historic criteria. So because that was established for your structure and a lot of structures in the district, we follow this procedure. Mr. Schomp, is there anything that we haven't addressed that you think from your perspective should be addressed?
Through those 3 criteria so far?
Or through anything that you've heard in the presentation?
The only mention I would make is I agree with the applicant that there is not a requirement for submitting any plans. I think where that can be considered is under subsection 4C, where it talks about the feasibility of alternative uses. And so that's sort of the way to show why an alternative use is not feasible. So that would be the only comment I would have in response to the applicant's comments, which I think were generally spot on, but I wanted to pinpoint that one as something I wanted to explain.
All right. So we can vote on this. I don't think this is going to be approved. That's my sense. You can choose to table this and come back, talk to us more. What is your choice? Would you come up and speak so we can get it on the record?
Is the question if I come back another time for a vote, demolition vote? Is that what you're asking?
Well, do you want to keep this case open and you want to table this, or do you want us to vote tonight? It's up to her.
Yes, you may.
What exactly do we have to come back with? We have to come back. I mean, I've heard so many different things. I'm very confused. Do you want drawings for a remodel? Do you want drawings for a new home?
You have a couple options. If you still think the demolition is viable, and I personally haven't seen evidence, you could come back with a lot more evidence suggesting demolition is viable.
Okay, that's...
The other option is if we vote on this, and it's probably not going to pass, you'd have to come back with design studies for what you were going to do with the structure to remodel. So if it's pretty clear right now, it's going to be a hard case for you to make. 1, because of the standards we're working with. 2, because there is not evidence of the kind of demolition issues that we've seen in other properties. So.
Okay, then I suggest we do not let them vote, and we'll come back, and I'm still lost. Okay, do we want to see plans? Do we want to see concepts?
But we do not have to use an architect of staff's choice. We just have to use one that you find is relative for historic areas, or?
We don't care who you choose. We're just suggesting
Yes.
it makes the process go a lot easier.
That
if you
sounds
have-
like economic hardship to me because I have to pay for somebody and I'm not sure, I'm still not guaranteed that it will be a smooth process and I have to pay for somebody more expensive than what I would typically choose in my budget. It seems like there's like this endless, never ending, like you guys could, each one of you could decide you would want to change this, you'd want to change this, and we have to keep going back to fix our things and pay money for an architect a little out of our budget anyway.
It's a cost of doing business. And if you have a potential, you've shown an $800,000 budget, there's a significant amount of documentation that you were proposing, close to 800. There is a significant amount of documentation, architect, a structural engineer, they're all going to have to prepare, okay? So you're going to have that cost. Out of that budget, you're going to have a significant cost. We're just saying you're best served picking somebody who's done this kind of work. You don't have to, but we're just saying. Experience counts.
I think.
He's saying experience within a historic district that understands the guidelines that are put in place. And in that case, this is where I think the consideration of a subordinate structure, which we talked about at the last meeting and we've talked about again today, is still something we think is viable. I think as a board, we haven't seen enough evidence to support the demolition as Mr. Alexander has expressed.
And as a courtesy,
Yes.
we're explaining to you, you can table. But from what I've seen, I think you're going to have a really difficult case proving the demolition.
So, I mean, I think that's the thing. The code has the certain things, what's the reason to demo? What's
Yeah.
the economic risk, or
Yeah.
what are the risks if you don't demo? I think
I
this
guess,
is.
For me, it just feels like if this is a process that everyone is supposed to have like equal success in, and you shouldn't, there's no, you don't have to be a gazillionaire to find success in the process. It shouldn't matter. Then like, why don't you guys have a architect that you prefer in the area and pay them to consult, or pay them to do a tutorial, pay them to do a website that any architect could go to and glean from and learn from and understand from. It still seems like we're expected to be able to, afford a certain type of thing when I'm like, I feel like it's like a disadvantage if you don't have, unlimited funds to do so.
Mrs. Lyons, I appreciate your frustration, but the code is exactly what you're asking for. And all architects and you have access to that. So you could use any architect, any.
The code for renovations is like 7 it's like 7 things listed. And one of
that's
them
what you
actually
need
says
to
that
follow.
the roof line cannot be above our original roof line, which apparently, even though that's in the code, that may not be true. Another thing it says is that you can't add on with certain materials. One prohibited, there's like 3 things prohibited, and one is concrete block. Like you cannot add on with concrete block when that's like the significance of our house. So there's things listed where I'm like, it's just a little, it feels like, and then when I was here for my informal, I asked, I said, would you guys be willing to talk to our builder or architect that are here and, talk to them about things? And Ms. Cram said, that's not really what we do. And I was like, okay, it's not overly helpful. And then we have our private meeting with our staff that tells us, well, we need to use the architect of their selection. So it's not like we haven't tried to find some common ground without having to change our architect that we chose. I don't know.
I don't know if there's much more
Yeah.
we can say. So the choice is yours. As I said, you have the option to table it, but from what we've seen, I think the demo is going to be a difficult hurdle for you to overcome. But you have that option, or we can vote on the motion. Even if we vote down the demolition, you still can do significant addition, renovation. You just need to bring drawings back.
We will choose to table and come back another time.
That's fine.
Okay.
Would someone make a motion to table?
Table.
I'll move to table the action or the application
Per the request.
indefinitely until the applicant returns.
I'll second.
Mr. Jewell,
Yes.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes?
Mr. Cotter,
Yes.
Ms. Cooper,
Yes.
Ms. Damser.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Can I ask this is a kind of a separate question, Ms. Holt? There is a appeal procedure about contributing structures also. Is that true? As I'm trying to remember in my reading the code, I didn't look at it before, but there is a way that a homeowner could appeal whether it's contributing or not. Is that,
That is a part of the code, yes.
okay, so that is a option that a homeowner would have if they wanted to look at why the
That's true.
structure would not or should not be contributing. So there's a separate process that sits inside there.
Yes.
Do you understand what Mr. Cotter, just to make it clear to you?
Yeah, so for me, it's not really, the question is, there is a appeal code, or there's section in the code that would let you go to, and I didn't read it in detail, that would let you appeal whether your structure is contributing. So you could go through there and say, okay, you're an architect, there are some procedures that you could go through and say, the reason that I shouldn't have to do this, my house is not contributing, here's the reasons, and then you would be in a different spot in the code. So just as a follow-up, yep.
Thanks, John. Very helpful. Okay. Cases 2 and 3 will be heard together. All right. Case 2 is Fox in the Snow at 38 West Bridge Street. This is a minor project review. The application is a request for exterior modifications to an existing building on a 0.29 acre site zoned Historic District Historic Core. The site is northwest of the intersection of West Bridge Street with Darby Street. And case 3 is Fox in the Snow, same address. This is the master sign plan. The application is a request for the installation of an approximately 19 square foot wall sign for the existing building zoned Historic District Historic Core on a 0.29 acre site. It's northwest of the intersection of West Bridge Street with Darby Street. Ms. Molinax will be our presenter. And Taylor, whenever you're ready.
Thank you and good evening. This case is for review and approval of a minor project review for exterior modifications and a master sign plan for a wall sign located at 38 West Bridge Street. Both applications will be presented together this evening. The 0.29 acre site is highlighted here in yellow and has approximately 63 feet of frontage along West Bridge Street. Property is zoned Historic District, Historic Core, and is surrounded by commercial uses also zoned Historic Core. The existing international style building was built in 1965 and originally served as a U.S. post office until 1982. The masonry building features a stone accent wall and covered entry on its front facade. The building is recommended contributing. The same entity owns both this property and 50 West Bridge Street, where the J. Lou restaurant is located. The applicant is proposing a coffee shop in the 2,958 square foot building, along with a unique sign concept. These are the existing conditions for the site. The front of the building faces West Bridge Street and the rear faces Wing Hill Lane. Additional existing conditions for the site include the east elevation, which faces the Dublin Veterinary Clinic, and the west elevation, which faces the J. Lee Restaurant. Site modifications include the following: adding landscape islands throughout the site, including screening for the dumpster area, replacing dying plants in existing planting islands, restriping the existing parking, reconfiguring the parking spaces where the ADA parking is located and repair the ADA ramp, and remove the flagpole and bollards near the front entry. The required parking for eating and drinking establishments is 10 spaces per 1,000 square feet. Based on this requirement, the site should contain 30 parking spaces. 18 spaces are proposed on the site, including one ADA space, with an additional 12 spaces obtained through a shared parking agreement with 50 West Bridge Street JLU Restaurant. Both sites are owned by the same person, so they will have access to all spaces between both properties. And staff is in favor of the parking plan as presented. On the south elevation, the applicant is proposing to add new steel frame windows and a front entry door. A waiver will be required for the steel material, and staff is supportive of this request. The applicant is proposing to add muntins to the storefront windows. Staff does not recommend this, nor does Preservation Designs Limited, the city's preservation architect who was consulted on the project. In their memo, Preservation Designs Limited stated that it is preferable that the existing storefront windows remain. Adding muntins would take away from the simple material aesthetic of the glass, and thus changing window proportions alters the overall material composition. Additionally, the applicant is proposing to add cedar planks to the ceiling of the covered entry to address water damage. A trellis system will be added on the existing stone facade to help create their signature sign concept. And then lastly, they are proposing to paint the gas meter to match the stone facade and conceal the utility. On the east elevation, these are where the majority of the architectural changes can be viewed from. The new steel frame windows are proposed as they were on the south elevation. The applicant is proposing to enlarge the existing opening of the horizontal ribbon window and add muntins. Staff is supportive of using 2 horizontal rows of windows that match the existing, where the stone sill is retained and repeated to best honor the architecture. A recommended condition of approval describes this idea. Staff is not supportive of the muntins as proposed. Rather, staff recommends that the muntins be diminished so that they are less visible. The applicant is also proposing a new window to the left of the existing window opening, and staff is not supportive of this window opening as its form is not architecturally appropriate for the international style. New exterior lighting will be added to replace the existing non-compliant floodlights. New utility screening for the rooftop equipment will also be added to the 2 new rooftop units as well. All units will be screened. A waiver is required for the requested screening, and staff supports this waiver request. Lastly, the electric service will be painted to match the existing brick and will conceal the utility. And on the north elevation, the applicant is not proposing any new additions. The applicant is proposing to clean, repair, or replace the existing awning. If replacement is needed, this item will be administratively approved by staff. And then lastly, the applicant is proposing to remove the existing non-compliant floodlight. These are the proposed materials and colors. Note the RTU screening, which will be an extruded aluminum product, an anodized clear color to match the era of the building. Staff supports the waiver for this material. Also note that the lighting is presented here for the east elevation, as well as the window and door materials, for which staff also supports that waiver. And next, we're going to transition to look at the master sign plan application. The applicant is proposing a 10 square foot dimensional wall sign on the front elevation facing West Bridge Street. The sign deviates from the code due to its size, custom aluminum sign material, lack of dimensional lettering, and brand image, which is used as the proposed wall sign in lieu of lettering. The sign will be located at a height of 6 feet and 4 inches from grade to the top of the sign and will be mounted to the existing stone wall by 4-inch stainless steel standoffs attached at the mortar joints. The color of the sign is two-toned with white shading to accentuate the features of the fox on a green powder-coated base. The wall sign will also be circled by Boston ivy, which is part of the tenant's brand image as seen at other locations. Lastly, the fox will be halo illuminated from behind to provide visual interest and add vibrancy to the streetscape. Staff recommended the type of illumination to the applicant to prevent any additional mounding to the historic stone facade. And then relative, although not part of this application, to tonight's discussion is the future Franklin Street extension. This is a city project due to start construction in spring of 2023. Franklin Street is due to extend west of 50 West Bridge Street, as shown here in the white box. Staff is working with the property owner and the city regarding the site changes to both sites. The changes will not affect the shared parking agreement between both sites. And the owner, future tenant, and the City of Dublin will submit a joint ARB application for future site modifications for both sites at the appropriate time, which will be memorialized as a recommended condition of approval. There are 2 waiver requests this evening, one for steel windows in the door, and then the other for the RTU screening. Staff has reviewed both waiver requests to the applicable criteria as shown and found that the criteria is either met since the materials are architecturally appropriate for the building or not applicable. The minor project criteria is met with waivers, met with condition or not applicable. All master sign plan criteria is met. Staff recommends approval of the waivers for the aluminum material for RTU screening and the steel framed windows and door. Additionally, staff recommends approval of the parking plan. And finally, we are at our recommendations for the minor project. Planning recommends approval of the minor project with conditions. First, that within 2 years, the owner of the properties at 38 and 50 West Bridge Street, this tenant and the city shall make a joint application for a minor project to address various site modifications and additions at time of the Franklin Street extension project on both properties. Number 2, if the Franklin Street site circulation project is not completed within 2 years, that the dumpster enclosure must be fully screened. Number 3, that the square window on the east elevation shall not be approved and muntins on the south facade shall not be approved. The applicant shall continue to work with staff on the horizontal window to better respond to the architectural style of the building. And 4, all items which require maintenance, repair, or replacement be fully addressed to the city's satisfaction within 1 year. And finally, that the applicant work with staff to administratively approve any color changes to the awning on the north elevation. And finally, we have recommendations for the master sign plan. Planning recommends approval of the master sign plan with one condition, that the applicant apply for permanent sign permits through building standards prior to erecting the wall sign. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions, and the applicant is in attendance. Thank you.
Thanks, Taylor. Any questions for Taylor?
Nope.
I have 2. In the staff report, you mentioned you want the muttons less visible. Now, does that mean you want, I'm inferring, and maybe not correctly, you want less of them, or do you want them thinner?
So staff's recommendation was for them to be less visible, especially on the east facade, and we would defer to the architect to bring their design expertise
Okay. Okay, so
and
that's
continue
kind
to
of-
work with staff.
That's, okay. Then the other question I have is you are recommending approval of the material, the steel to be used on the front windows. But but you essentially want the size of the glazing to be comparable to what's there now. So instead of aluminum storefront, or aluminum system, it's steel, which is fine. But you have questions about the divisions of that. Is that correct? You don't want that divided.
Correct. So staff is looking for the overall storefront form to remain, but is not recommending the muntins on the storefront,
Okay.
if that helps answer your question.
It does help
Okay.
answer my question. I think it's probably something we'll spend some time discussing, but it helps answer my question. I see the applicant, Mr. Rosenthal. Would you like to address us?
I should know better. I'm Andrew Rosenthal. I'm the architect for the applicant. And the staff comments make it sound easier than it is, which is nice. But it's a little complicated. Only, the international style issue of the project is one that obviously we're very aware of as architects. And I think the first thing we drew and showed the clients and that we shared with staff at one of our meetings was, I believe, entirely consistent with international style architecture and would have been easy to approve. Unfortunately, the client feels, that that's not consistent and doesn't really support, what they need as a business to, create the environment they're looking to create. So what you saw in the packet is really what they want to do. And if you're familiar, if you've been to any of the other locations, or if you're familiar with that sort of nature of construction for windows, it's it's a solid steel sort of custom window construction that lots of people want and not very many people want to pay for because it's very expensive. It's very substantial and very nice. It is definitely not international style architecture. And so I think, we've looked at this property with a number of clients over the last 4 or 5 years. And my perspective is this is probably the closest to a perfect fit as we've seen. And I think that's part of the reason we're here talking to you. It's not a perfect fit. What they would like to do, if you're familiar with Fox and the Snow's 4th Street location, which I think might be in some of the materials, they'd like to paint the building. They'd like to use these windows. They'd like to have gooseneck light fixtures on a painted mural on the stone on the front of the building and grow ivy directly on the structure. And working with staff, we were able to get through a number of those issues. And they said, all right, fine, we don't have to paint the masonry. And we actually didn't get that to staff. I said, they will not approve that. We came up with a strategy to grow ivy that doesn't put it directly on the building, eliminated the goosenecks with staff's help with doing the sort of halo lighting. I think the windows for them feels like that won't do it. So I think their perspective, and they understand that, why what staff's recommending is architecturally more relevant or accurate. And I think the question just becomes, maybe there's no way to make them a good fit for the structure, what they need and what you're comfortable seeing done to the structure just don't match up. I would say as an architect, I wouldn't be here. The way I feel comfortable presenting this is that I think what they're proposing to do is of very high quality. I think it's reversible. So I think if later somebody said, hey, I want this to look just like a 1965 post office, it could be made to do that. And then I think, and it needs to be done. Something has to be done. The existing door is not original. It's insulated glass, just standard aluminum storefront done. I don't know when. All the other glazing is original. So it's single pane. So it would have to be replaced. Anyone's going to replace it with something. And there's a decent chance it has some asbestos associated with it. So, the windows will be replaced by whoever uses the building next, just from an energy perspective, if nothing else. And so then the question becomes, well, does someone replace them with, something that looks exactly like what was there originally or not? The east facade, I think, made perfect sense for post office, where wall space and sorting mail is a priority. But it probably doesn't make great sense for a lot of the types of users you probably would like to see on Bridge Street, because they want light, and in their case, obviously, they want the east light for early morning uses. So, so that's conundrum where architecture meets commerce. And I don't know what the answer is. Luckily, I'm not on the board, but that's the sort of question or the challenge is, to try to figure out, how much you're willing to see the building deviate from what it was originally to accommodate this user, or whether you choose to push it down the road and, and hope that you can find someone who is willing to live with it closer to what it was originally. And I'm happy to answer questions.
A quick question. So, I mean, on the, what is this, the east facade, so the windows are there just, I mean, aesthetically to bring light into the building. I mean, staff has this 2 ribbon, okay, so essentially it'd be a third less light, I would say.
Yeah, and it's not clear to me the way it's worded. I'm not totally clear if the suggestion is the suggestion is 2 separate windows, or whether it's, which would be, the nice thing is the header is existing for the big window. So to lower that sill is fairly simple structurally from an investment perspective. And it's not totally clear to me if the recommendation is to build a second header and a second section of masonry and a second window below that, or
the way I understood it, you were going to just repeat the up top ribbon window below that someplace.
Correct, yeah, so it's maintaining the sills and just repeating the same existing window form right below.
But you weren't talking about suspending a sill between 2 windows, were you?
No, so I think the sill would be represented, it would stay, the existing window would remain as is, and then that would be repeated just below.
The dimension of the existing window would stay in the new material. Is that what you're saying?
Correct, yes.
Okay. So essentially, it's going to be one taller window with a division occurring at the line where.
Okay. So for me, in my mind, I had it. You were going to have 2 ribbons with brick between it. So you're going to have.
Correct.
You're going to have.
So you're going to remove the middle sill? What is now the present sill?
Existing sill.
That would remain.
Yeah, because that's what I'm confused too when I was wanting to see how it would look versus they're getting the same effect with what they've proposed here. This is a morning business, correct? So that east side is definitely critical for light and everything else, because from my reading is that, they'll be done, it's an early afternoon business with trying to get light in there, which kind of makes sense.
Yeah. I'm still not sure what staff is recommending. Maybe now. Yeah. So you're going to have 1 ribbon, you keep the existing, put a gap, existing brick, and then you'll cut another ribbon window, same dimensions, underneath that by a foot or something like this. Okay.
That is correct, yes.
We'll talk a little bit more about that during our,
All right.
I mean, there's some issues, I think.
And if I may too, it's also conditioned as well that Andrew continues to work with staff on just finalizing those window details and making sure they're historically appropriate as well.
And I can understand the adding more windows just because of the type of business it's going to be. They need the light in there.
I have 2 questions for you. One of them, tell us about the window, the square window that the staff is suggesting should not be approved on the east elevation, and the purpose of that.
It's really just the point about getting more light in the space. It's just it was a way to leave the existing header intact and find it out, to the right of that or the north of that will be back of house stuff. So it was really just a way to get more light into that dining room. So whether that were to, that's probably the remaining piece that's got some flexibility in terms of if that were to change configurations, I think there's probably some play there from their perspective. But, I think there's a fundamental question on the table, which is just, either the board can or can't live with the idea that these are more of an industrial sash than would have been typical on this structure in 1965. I think that's really what they've asked me to ask you. And so, the boards have been, or the staff's been great to work with and very helpful. But I don't have, it sounds negative to say it this way, but I don't have much confidence that there'd be a solution that the owners and staff or the consultants would agree to I think they really feel like, well, this is what we need, what they need to do to make a Fox and Snow work at this location. So that's.
What if they, we're kind of jumping ahead of ourselves here, but what if the division was asymmetrical and you had less grids, but you had, say, an upper division of units that was a smaller width than the lower, so the horizontality that's apart, you're good. You could come up with something that's both horizontal and the connection is made with the sash color and the type of sash. Because I've been to their place on North 4th Street. It's close to my office, but so I can understand the connection. But isn't there another way, a middle ground where?
We've drawn a lot. I mean, we've certainly drawn options, and I think they're just, from their perspective, what you're seeing is representative of what, they feel like they want to be in Dublin if they're in this look. Well, if they're anywhere in Dublin. And so I think they feel like, well, if this doesn't work here, we'll keep looking until we can find a place where we can do what it is we want to do. So it's, I guess I would say I have not a ton of confidence that there's something we haven't drawn that makes them feel good about the investment and makes staff feel comfortable with the solution at this juncture.
Because I'm a little concerned with the solution that was proposed, was suspending a line of brick and for this long strip and having a window up high and a window down low. I think, one, the constructability of that is a major challenge. And I think it's going to look really peculiar. So I would have just, as an architect designer, have a real issue with that. And I think it's not going to look international style with this band of brick running through there. But okay, well, we'll come back and talk a little bit more here in a moment. Any other questions for Mr. Rosenthal? Okay. Have we had any public comment on this? Is there anyone here, Mr. Holton?
Thank you. Tom Holton, 5957 Roundstone Place. Good to see that something's happening with the old post office. It's been an embarrassment for probably 10 years by being neglected. The couple of comments I might ask for some clarification on the proposal. Did I understand that the plan was for trellis over the whole stone facade?
That is correct.
I would suggest not doing that. That this is the post office itself is an historic building. It's the first permanent post office in Dublin. It's an historic treasure, if you will, even though people don't necessarily see it that way. This is before 1965, we didn't have a post office. It moved from building to building. And we point that out from the historical society and on tours and things. This is an important building for Dublin's history. So if the trellis is important, as I understood it from your presentation, the trellis was a part of the identity for the company. Is that correct? It's incorporated into the logo somehow? I mean, the ivy.
Yeah.
The ivy and the logo go together. If that is important, I may suggest to the board that the trellis, since the ivy has to climb on the trellis, that the ivy or the trellis be integrated only behind the logo and not over the whole stone. So just narrow it down to the logo only. Also, did I understand that there was suggested to paint the stone? Did I hear that?
That is incorrect.
It is correct or not?
It's not correct.
Oh,
The stone
thank you.
is not being painted.
Okay, thank you.
It's just I think you're thinking of the utility that will be painted to match the stone color.
Okay. Also, did I read correctly that the logo is 10 feet in diameter?
It has a total square footage of 10 feet. That's correct.
Isn't that larger than sign code? You're off.
It is larger than, now, it's the ring that's the 10 feet. And
But
so
the Fox is ring to ring.
It's not 10 feet. If you go to those dimensions.
But isn't that still above code guidelines?
I can understand why staff is recommending approval based on some other things that have been approved at this size and larger. Mural is an example. It is bigger. It is bigger.
I'd still ask the board to reduce the size. I will say one thing about the truck in the back is non-compliant. I'm glad it's gone. It's been there for at least 6 years with a flat tire. And I have photographic evidence of that the city has not followed through, but that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Do you want to start moving through the motions and the items and have our discussion in those? During those? Yeah. So the first motion is to approve the 2 waivers, mechanical equipment and steel windows. Now, in that motion for the steel windows, the waiver is just for material, not necessarily the design, but a material that's current, that issues with the design are addressed later below. But this is a material that's not in our code, so.
That's
I'll
correct.
Yeah, I can make that motion for approving.
I just want to do.
We knew the materials.
See if everybody's okay. See if everybody's okay.
Mhm. Yep. I'll go ahead and make the motion to approve the waivers for the materials for the steel windows and the screen, RTU screen.
Do we need to approve those first? Or what do we need?
We're doing these separate, the waivers separate?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, do we need to go?
Oh, do we need,
We have to go through the,
we need to do each waiver separately?
That's the cleanest way for the record.
Okay.
Okay.
So we'll do, thanks, Lori. We'll do each waiver separately. Okay. I'm glad you're here tonight. Okay. Yeah. So the first waiver should be for the mechanical equipment.
Yes, so I'll make that motion for the first waiver for the, set for the RTU screen, the materials.
I'll second.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Ms. Damaser?
Yes.
Ms. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Jewell?
Yes.
And Mr. Cotter?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now, is there a second motion to approve the use of the steel windows?
And I can make that motion as well for the other waiver, for the approval for the steel material for the windows.
Yeah, that was my question.
Door.
Does it include the door?
It's just the steel materials, yep.
It's for the windows, all windows, and the entry door.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
I'll second that.
Mr. Jewell made the motion.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ms. Damaser?
Yes.
Mr. Cotter?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Ms. Cooper?
Yes.
And Mr. Jewell?
Yes.
Okay. As we go through the second motion, do you think we need to vote on each condition separately?
So it depends on how your discussion goes. I have seen it, we'd move to approve the minor project review subject to the 5 conditions. I have seen that, but if as your discussion unfolds, you realize there might be some points of contention, we can always split it out so that we're all clear.
And that's the process we followed. So I just wanted to see if, okay, thank you. Okay, all right. Okay, could we have the graphic up with the 5 conditions so that we can,
Mr. Chairman, if I might, we will also need a vote on the parking plan, please.
Okay.
Did you want that motion to include the condition that it be revisited? Or that's part of the 5 conditions? Okay.
That is part of the 5. So the parking plan in general just needs to be approved or disapproved.
And that plan is the sharing between the 2 businesses?
Correct.
All right, I can,
Less spaces.
We're approving or not approving the reduction in spaces required, but we are also, isn't there a condition that they come back when the Franklin Street extension isn't that a condition
And
for
that-
the parking plan?
No, it is not related to the parking plan. The parking plan will stay regardless of the Franklin Street project. And the arrangement with the shared parking next door at J. Lou's will stay because the ownership is the same between the 2 properties.
Yes, I understood that part. I just thought that there was a factor in there about the Franklin Street extension being part of the parking.
there is, but we're going to vote on it
Got it.
with, under conditions.
It's a different element of it.
So this parking plan is, we're approving will be here and ongoing. The conditional revisiting is if any changes are needed in a year or whenever the.
That's right, and at that time, they will be adding bike parking, and they will do some other landscaping and other things that are related more to site development than actual parking. This approves the agreement between the two properties to share the parking.
Which would enable them to meet the parking requirement.
Exactly, for both of them.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
Does, you say this is, that the parking, the shared parking plan works because the 2 buildings are owned by the same owner. What if one is sold? Does that negate the whole plan, or is the new buyer stuck with this plan? Stuck is the wrong word. Is.
They would be
new buyer
subject to that.
assumed
They
that
would,
plan?
yes, they would be subject to that.
Okay,
Yes.
all right.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the parking plan?
I will move to approve the parking plan.
Thank you.
I'll second.
Okay.
Ms. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Jewell?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes,
Mr. Cotter?
Yes.
Ms. Damiser?
thank you.
Yes, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, now here are the 5 conditions. Here's the only question I have about that first one. Mr. Rosenthal is here, but we don't have a representative from J. Lou here. And we're asking both owners to agree. And so, and while there was a letter from Mr. Lou's legal counsel in our packet, it didn't necessarily pertain to this. So do we just strike
Actually,
this?
the way this is written, it only, it involves the owner of both properties, but he happens to be the owner of the one property we're considering today, the tenant who's at issue today, and the city. So it doesn't include J. Lou, the tenant of the other property.
But Mr. Lou owns them both, and he's not here.
The fact that he's not here, yeah, okay.
So, do we need to address this tonight? I just don't want to approve something that I'm not comfortable. If he's not here, he can't speak to it, or he hasn't. Mr. Rosenthal, you probably have you had any conversations with him about this specifically?
Only that I know that that staff has definitely communicated, and I think there's general consensus around what the possibilities are, and that there's nothing, I think because the city's plans are somewhat in flux, everything is somewhat in flux. So I think that's sort of how they arrived at this sort of thought, was to say, well, as a way to keep things moving. But I don't know, to your point, I don't know if that went away, it adversely affects our application. But I think Yeah.
It may be safer just to strike it and deal with it later.
That's okay with us. Staff from planning and engineering, mobility and transportation has met with Mr. Liu. That occurred early last week, and we talked about this as a concept when we were talking about the overall site improvements. You know, I think it would be fine to actually remove this. I feel like we all have a good understanding of what needs to happen, and that can be worked out separately as part of the Franklin Street.
Everybody okay with that?
I think that's.
Okay. Is
Yeah,
there a motion?
I think that's the way to go.
Motion to remove this?
Well, I think when we get to the motion to approve, we just don't include that condition. And I also think the second condition gets modified to just say, that the dumpster enclosure must be fully screened if something to the effect of, if the Franklin Street project does not address this, then the dumpster must be screened within 2 years. Because we don't know how long it's going to take, and we don't know what that project's going to look like. We don't want to assume anything. And I think that it just, the way the second condition is written is kind of confusing.
And if I may, I think that was, the notion there was simply that there's some thought that potentially all the dumpsters and backhouse stuff gets consolidated. So I think it's, to simply say that if there's still a dumpster there in 2 years, it needs to be enclosed per city guidelines seems like a completely reasonable. Yeah, the only other scenario is it's now in a bigger enclosure that's shared by the two properties, moved to make parking work better, you know what I mean? So I think what you're saying makes perfect sense, that it would be easy to just say, if it's still there, it needs to be enclosed at that point. The alternative is it's somewhere else where it will be fully enclosed, so.
Well, and the subsequent Franklin Street site circulation project may change, as you said, where the dumpster is located, all of those things, or how it is arranged, et cetera, so.
Yeah, and I think this was just staff trying to not ask us to build something that was going to get torn down in 18 months because
Absolutely.
we changed the parking layout, so.
Would it work if we just remove the parentheses, condition 1?
Probably if you
I think-
disconnect it
I
from
think you
Franklin
need to,
Street,
yeah.
right? Disconnect it from the project and then put a time.
Yeah, I would just say the dumpster enclosure must be completed within
in
2
some-
years.
In some timeframe, right? And then that way.
That's fine too.
Are you modifying it based on? Okay. How's that? Everybody okay? Okay. Okay, let's move to 3.
I think we're more coming back to the staff to work with the applicant to rework this window situation.
It seems like the second sentence is, and there's some flexibility in the second sentence. But the first sentence, there's no flexibility in parts of that. How do board members feel about the square window? Well, just first, the idea of having that square window on the east elevation. On the east elevation.
I guess I'm a little confused too on this whole condition because the second sentence is saying that they're going to include Mutton design, but the first one is just saying that they won't be approved. Am I reading this wrong?
It's the difference between the east and south.
South, okay, but the
No
same
Muttons
way
on
with
the
the
south.
square window on the east elevation shall not be approved I think we should break these up, period.
Okay, well, regardless of how we write that first sentence, how do you feel about the square window?
I actually like it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not opposed to it as long as it's consistent with the design of the building.
I think their, intent is the type of business it's going to be in there and trying to get more light in that portion of the business, especially being a AM breakfast place or whatever, coffee shop.
Well, or any kind of a restaurant or gathering place.
I agree with the window. They need more light. Now, the mutins, it's just, because we need to come back a bit to that, right? Because the front and side,
So right now, I'm just asking about,
what makes a difference with the window, for me, it makes a difference how that thing's gonna look, right? If
Yeah.
it's, I mean, whether you approve one or not, I mean, so it still has some architectural that you need to look at and say if it's gonna be one big piece of glass versus.
well, the mutton design could change the way you perceive it, so it may look initially like a square, but then depending on the mutton design.
Yep.
I have a question for Mr. Rosenthal. You had said earlier that the changes on the east facade could be reversed if someone wanted to return it to the international style. Does that include the square window? It seems to me to be,
Well, they'd have to fill it in, but
Yeah,
I
okay.
mean, so that to me is a more, but I guess my point really was that fundamentally the window system could be made. So, somebody could put in an aluminum standard storefront window system that I don't think would be particularly a great asset to the building or the neighborhood or the street, that the lines would look right and it would get approved easily, I think. And I think in this case, what we're bringing forward is something that is, constructionally a much more interesting and nice thing. It happens to not be consistent with, and very unique. It's not consistent with the style of the building entirely. So I think and I think they feel very strongly about, making that investment. And, staff rightly brings up, and I think your consultants rightly bring up, it's not international style. So, but my point is, whoever's going to touch this building next is going to replace all those windows. And the question is just, what configuration do those replacement windows go in?
yeah, no, I understand the need for, and I like having the square window. If I were in a coffee shop, I'd want as much light in the morning as possible, too.
But to reverse the changes in the front, truly the openings all stay the same. And that reversing is truly simple. On the east side, it's an understatement to say it's an easy thing, but one could, put the masonry back in and recreate the windows just like they are currently if they wanted to. But that's not exactly the same thing.
That would probably never happen.
But I guess we view that east side
Right.
as as a
won't.
secondary.
Too hard to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Honestly, we were surprised that there were any comments about the east side because to us that felt like a very secondary, historically a very secondary elevation to the structure. It's done in a way that was consistent with how things were done in 1965, but it caught us off guard that there was any concern about what happened to the east side just because it felt like I say, very secondary.
I'm okay personally with the square window. I think it can be, the perception of it can be tweaked with the way the muttons are treated. What are thoughts about, there's a lot of flexibility in the second sentence. And if they can't come to a consensus, they come back to us in the second sentence. Now, I haven't addressed the middle sentence. The applicant shall work, the south facade shall not be approved. So that's the one. Yeah, the muttons on the south. The challenge, well, is an attempt to create continuity between the two if you don't use it.
And I guess to put it in clearer focus, I truly think for them it's a deal breaker. I think they feel like that's critical. So, and again, it's not for lack of understanding why there's architectural concern about it, and it's not certainly for us not trying to explain it or understanding the question. But it's like I say, it's truly desires and needs of a business versus being respectful of the architectural heritage of the structure.
So do they come in, I'm just thinking about process, because I'm trying to build some flexibility here, and maybe you and the staff and representing your client could meet. Because if, it sounds like we're willing to approve the square window, and then if we included muttons on the south facade and the conditions on the east facade be worked out with staff, that might provide an opportunity for a little bit more give and take, not in the context of a meeting like this where we're trying to design it, because I think, I think there are some, and there are some other options here, but I think maybe there's a middle ground that we can find, and I would just like to keep the door open. Now, if others on the board feel differently, it's just one thought.
I mean, for me, certainly when you look at pictures of this style, you don't see that, right? You look at a lot of pictures, you don't see it. I don't know how you find flexibility between not and some and not. So, I mean, with the staff, maybe there is.
Well,
something.
the staff is allowing them to use the mutton color and steel on the south. They just don't want to divide it. So they're already establishing a relationship between those two.
Wait, that wasn't, no, that wasn't my understanding. They're allowing them to use the muttons, how do you pronounce it? Muntins? On the east.
The material, though. You're allowing the material to be used so that the look potentially is already integrating the two. They're allowing that steel to be used, not the divisions. And so in their language, the mutton is the division, but they're allowing, they're allowing the steel to be used in both locations. So they're already establishing some continuity between the two and what is being permitted. So there's already an opportunity to join those some way. I just want to give them another shot, and that's.
I just, if I may, just point out one thing about the east elevation faces a two-story building, and there's not a whole lot of space between the east elevation and the veterinary building. So just for what it's worth, it's not going to get a lot of public view. So just consider that in your discussion. Is it worth whether the mountain is going to be an inch or 3/4, an inch or ½ inch or something like that? Just how much time you want to spend on that particular angels dancing on the head of a pin kind of thing.
All right. I think he's telling us something. Okay. All right. So, so we want to strike the square window.
Say that again. We want to.
The part of the condition that says a
strike,
square window
yes,
on the
okay,
east elevation shall not be approved.
Sorry, one moment.
Oh, that's
Computer's having a moment.
All right, and then do we want to change the last sentence to say the applicant shall work with the staff on the arrangement of the windows on the south facade and east elevation?
Okay. Well, the question for me is that, I mean, we have to give some direction. What do we think about these muttons, whatever they are? Because for me, I feel like we're gonna be back here in a month talking about the exact same thing. So I I think we got to vet out whether we think, okay, if they come back and say it's got to be like this, do we feel like that's something that can be approved?
I'd be okay with a little, like if there was a strip at the top or something, but the primary planes of glass comparable to what's there, you still had a large surface on the south, so you still had a sense that there were originally big planes of glass there, but some way to connect potentially a division that might occur across the front windows with what's going on the east, because I think that's part of the intent of what's done is to unify the glazing system. And So I would be okay with some, but that's just myself. But I think that is what they're trying to do, but it would get us closer to your goal too.
So they're just trying to think the historic guideline, right? I mean, one of them is talking about putting the same window back in. So how do we find that? How do we find that balance and find a way that that they can live with something? Huh? I'm okay if there's some wiggle room in there. So that's when I don't want to send somebody back and Mr. Rosenthal saying, okay, no, that isn't going to fly either. So I don't want to send them on a wild goose chase here.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I mean, staff has been very generous with their time, and we've met at least twice and spoken a number of times. And I do think we're a little bit at that point. I do think we're a little bit at that point that you're highlighting, which is I think the client feels like, you know, we gave on that, we gave on that, we gave on that. This is the thing we really want. And again,
If you,
I want to, you know, Chairman Alexander's, you know, comment that you couldn't do it. As an architect, I want to think we can do it. But I truly, I'm at a loss for alternates that we could draw and put in front of the client that I think staff could comfortably say, there it is, that feels international style. And
does it serve your purpose if we just left that condition as it is? It's probably going to be.
Well, I think they don't, I mean, candidly, well, not candidly, publicly, I don't think they do the project if it doesn't, you know, I think they don't want to recreate what's there. So I think they just keep looking for a spot is what I think they do. So that's
great location, so.
Yeah,
it's
so that's
their choice.
Yeah. So,
I have to admit on this one, I mean, for me, from just our aesthetics, it looks okay, but it's hard to reconcile what's written here in front of us. I mean, given on one side and really.
Well, I think the consultant's right about the difference between the storefront and the
Yep.
glazing system on the side.
Yep, I agree.
And, you know, they're trying to significantly unify them, and I think the consultant's right, there is a difference, and so, but, let's see what the staff came up with. Do you want us to leave it like that?
do we have a photo of the rear of the building? It occurs to me that on a secondary elevation in a building of this vintage, a truly secondary, like the back of this one, you would have sort of standard divisions in the glazing, which I almost think the north side might have. So, you know, you could, I guess in theory, extend that logic to the east side and say, well, the east side, and you know, while the construction and language would be the same, that there might be a different attitude about dividing the glass on the east side, which is obviously most of the glass, and that the storefront needs to somehow make its way back to something. There's some small windows on that north side that it's hard to see in the photos, or hard for me to see, but I think they have more or less standard size, just because, you know, I think they were probably off-the-shelf windows.
Sorry, Andrew, which elevation did you want?
Well, the north side windows, yeah. So I guess, you know, those are original, and I suppose there's, to Chairman Alexander's point, there's potentially some logic that we could extend to say, well, north and east are secondary, and south is primary, and that potentially, you know, there's more divisions on the east side than on the south because it's like the back, it's secondary, and that we would then need to just solve for making the front bigger, some bigger sections of glass without recreating what's there exactly.
So the rear windows are from the original windows?
I mean, yeah, I think you can see the one in the photos definitely, you know, and again, I assume they were just buying stock windows off the shelf for that side of the building.
Yep.
But
Well, is this the condition that you just had up there a moment ago? It would build in the way it was rewritten. It would build in flexibility for you.
Yes, I believe it leaves it open-ended enough to continue, for the applicant to continue to work with staff on the arrangement of muntins.
So it's not discounting them.
Yeah, the hard thing is, yeah, they're at the spot when they're negotiations with the landlord that they got to either say we're doing it or we're not doing it. And so a month is hard.
Well, it's pretty clear we're not, it's pretty clear we're not going to approve what's on the drawing. So, I mean, and I think,
I guess if it would be helpful, I think for sure for us, and I imagine, I can't speak for staff, if any qualifying language about defining what the strategy or ought to be would be helpful, or the board's input on that or comments about that would be helpful. Just because we've already spent hours together, you know, amicably, but we've spent a lot of time together talking about it, and it's not like we don't have a meeting of minds about what the right thing architecturally is, but it's a matter of, you know, giving us a tool to.
that you maintain the hierarchy in glazing between the south and east side.
And in your mind, do you think that allows for potentially?
Okay, then I'll be more explicit, that you have less density of divisions, fewer divisions on the south than you have on the east.
That seems, yeah, that seems very, to me, that seems very helpful.
What are they now, 1 by 1? It's hard to say on that.
Oh, they're fairly large, what's drawn. I mean, I think they're 18 by 16, or they're fairly large as shown. Well, the front are giant currently. I thought you were asking what we were showing on the
On the front ones, the muttons, or 8, you think they're?
Well, what we're showing now are the same on the east and south.
Okay. Okay. But yeah, less density, if that could work.
And I guess if we said reduce the density of the south from what's illustrated, it would be helpful if we had, you know, is the east, to my mind, now that we're talking about the rear of the building, to my mind, the east as a secondary thing and as a relationship to the north side of the building, well, I would like to say it's fine, and that the goal is then to reduce the density of divisions on the south side and the primary facade of the building. And I don't know if that's something the board's comfortable with, but.
I think the staff's comment about the horizontality of the divisions, not just the opening, is a legitimate, and the staff and the consultants.
Right.
And
that is the hard thing with that is a difficult thing to get the clients who are paying for it to get to. And so again, I guess
at some point we're going to come to, you know, we're trying to give you flexibility, but, you know, if it's not doing any good, I mean, and you think the client's going to, I mean, I think that we've got another applicant and
could you be decorative, paint them on? I mean, then you could reverse them. I mean, is there other ways to do something that is truly not permanent? Or is it just going to be?
no, I don't think you could paint it or put snap-ins or anything like that.
And of course, the irony is that less divisions greatly reduces the expense of building windows this way, which we've also highlighted, but it's,
Because right now there's shown there.
All right.
Things. Right?
Can you put, Taylor, if you could put the language up, we'd probably need to come to resolution, here. To better respond to the existing architecture style of the building.
Well, can we break that apart? Because didn't we kind of agree to the horizontal ribbon window as proposed? Sorry. Didn't we discuss the horizontal ribbon window on the east elevation and say that we were okay?
I don't recall we said we were okay with the way it was divided.
Well, then I still think we should divide these two and treat the south facade separately from the east. And I know we have said we're not objecting to the additional window, but the way they have it drawn on the east is a triple, and the way you are talking about it is a double with the space. So we should go over that first, because it
Okay.
may make the south facade moot.
Okay. We could say the south facade can have muttons, but at a significant less density than shown on the drawings tonight, or the drawings submitted, and reflecting the original hierarchy, the original order, or some way reflecting the pattern on that side. And then okay. Okay.
At least flexibility, huh? I mean, we're talking about density here, right? So,
So okay, so you just simplified it.
yeah.
That's fine. Just want to leave it at that, you know what we're talking about, or do you need more specificity in there?
I think that makes very clear what to do with the south side. I guess the question is, like I say, I'm out of ideas for ways to reiterate the east side that split the differences. I feel like, again, staff's been very generous with their time, and we've looked at lots of possibilities, but I don't know. So I guess
So
if we ask for a vote saying the east side stays as drawn and the south side gets simplified to look more consistent with the international style and the existing stuff, but the construction is the same, and you vote no, that's hopeful in a certain respect. I mean, it moves their decision process down the road. Does it give us the option to come back or do we have to, or does it not work that way?
if you change the design, I don't know why it can't come back, yeah. Or, go ahead.
Certainly, the applicant could come back before the board. We, on the discussion of these windows, we would certainly hope and anticipate that we could get to an arrangement that I think we understand what you're talking about. I think the architect may be in a bit of a tricky spot with what his clients want. I've got a sketch here of what I think we're talking about. But if we can't come to an agreement, certainly the applicant can come back before the board.
Okay. And it's valuable for you, for your client, to see that we voted no on the current arrangement.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, that was, the instructions were, go to the meeting, show them what we've agreed to, and they can either say yes or no. That's what we'd like to do. They said that if they don't want us in this location, we'll try to figure something else out later.
Okay.
You know, that's really what I was asked to do. So I don't know how much trouble I'm in if I come back and say, well, I got you this approved, but it's not what you wanted. I don't know where we are exactly. But those were their instructions, where let's just say this is what a Fox and Snow needs to look like in the spot. Maybe the board's okay with that. Maybe the board's not okay with that. If the board's not okay with that, we respectfully understand and move on. You know, everyone goes their separate ways.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
when I look at it, I think, just based on this conversation, I look at these, you know, to me, there's a logic that says, well, these facades not so unlike, it's more like the north facade than it is the south, architecturally. And the north side of the building has vertical windows that are, you know, that big. So to me, the east side is drawn, I'm comfortable with, architecturally more comfortable with it than I was when I got here. The south side, I think, is not hard to do what you're saying and get closer to what you're asking for. But I'm reticent to leave here saying that we're going to try to go another 3 rounds on the east side and try to arrive at something.
So if we rewrite this and just take out the conditions, and then we introduce a condition that the windows pattern as drawn is not approved. For both, because, I mean, he's saying it's.
And if it's meaningful to the board, I think to say south facade would get simplified to look more consistent with what's currently there. or, in terms of scale. I don't know if the applicant gets to ask. for
Okay, so that would be
conditions, but
helpful.
that's a condition that
Okay.
if that helps with the plausibility of passage, I think it's, meaningful, but.
Okay, can you draft something? I'm running out of energy. Can you draft something to the effect that working with the staff, the south elevation, the applicant should work with the staff to revise the south elevation that could incorporate muttons, but in a way that's more consistent with the existing character of the front. Okay? Okay.
I feel like we're somehow splitting hairs a little bit here.
I know we are. Now, do we say, and in that condition, the east, the pattern of divisions in the east elevation, the pattern of muttons in the east elevation will not be approved as submitted? Is not approved as submitted. So so we can address both? Okay.
Well,
Where does that put,
yeah,
put him? Yeah.
it does, yeah. It's,
All I'm saying is the pattern, and that's why I'm being very specific, the pattern of muttons. The openings, we've essentially approved with that language. It would just be the pattern of muttons in the proposed openings as submitted or not approved. Just the pattern.
Because then they're going to need to
You're
match.
meaning the triple.
The triple with the way it's divided horizontally, so the grid across there.
Right, so the size and the non-divided ribbon, we approve. Right, okay. It's just the divisions of the muttons.
Exactly.
Okay.
No, I don't understand that. The size of the not, say that again?
The two openings, the square and the horizontal.
Yes.
And the extra, this isn't with, the height
Yeah.
Right, right.
is approved. It's just,
So basically, we're saying it's okay to do a second line, a second ribbon.
That's, no, that's where some of the confusion came in. No, he's drawn two openings, okay, one, the square.
I know the
And then
square,
the
I got that.
long horizontal. So we're saying those two openings, I don't know what these minutes look like. Those two openings are approved as drawn. It's the way they're subdivided.
Right.
that-
Yeah.
right, so we're not, I hate to sound awful, but we're not accepting staff's revision of that.
Yes,
Correct.
correct.
That's correct.
Because we all said the square is okay.
We
Well,
all
the
said
square and
the
the
square
big
is okay to add in. That's the new window. But the configuration of the
Mutton.
muttons and the adding of an extra rim, are we saying, or an extra layer, if you will, of windows, are we saying that they have to be divided the way it was described earlier? Two separate windows, horizontal
No.
windows?
No,
No, we're saying as the picture shows, where it's all uniform.
we're good with that.
That's good. Okay.
It's just the subdivisions that
With,
Yes.
from what?
we
by
want
the
them to go back and
muttons.
come back to us with.
So basically, we're reducing the muttons, the density there, and reducing a little bit to the south so that they kind of work together.
Right.
Yeah, so the east and, so we're kind of give and take it on both east and south side.
Okay.
And just from, if we approve that, then staff could look, I mean, if you came back tomorrow with something that you saw that fit what we were thinking, you could approve that.
Yes,
okay.
that is correct.
Yeah, okay. And if you come back with something,
And if we develop, if we come to an impasse, we may be back.
back to say yes or
That's
no
right.
to whatever the
Yes.
last thing is.
Okay,
Yes.
Okay with 4 and 5?
Yes.
and you're clear on what we're talking about. You looking.
I hope he's
You got
clear.
the deer in the headlight here. Look,
as someone who's sat where you guys sit on a different board, I appreciate the fatigue that comes with the process. Not entire, I don't know, I don't entirely. I mean, I guess it would be helpful to, what I would like to leave with is language that says the east side isn't like the south side. The south side's the front, and it should read more like a front, like it does today. And that the east side, we have some leeway to say it's going to be smaller, more like the north side. Smaller windows, smaller glazed openings. The panes are going to be smaller, just like the north side has smaller panes, because it's not the front.
I mean, we could, if that helps you, we could add to either at the end of 4 or 5, just saying the divisions on the east and south don't need to match.
Because we're not asking for that.
Yeah. Does that help you?
I think it helps us and staff, yeah, I mean,
All right.
to clarify that.
All right. Okay. Okay.
What does the first sentence of number 4 mean? And do we need it? If we're approving the windows as presented, then do we need that first sentence?
It's a good point. Because what we're all talking about up here is it's the pattern in the openings that we're not.
We just had the discussion where we said we approve the overall
openings is fine.
dimensions.
The pattern of muttons in the east elevation is not approved. So I think you're right. I think you could take out.
And perhaps the pattern of the muttons on the east and south elevations are not approved, would be more accurate, because they did present us muttons on the south as well.
Okay.
So to summarize, we're saying that the south elevation windows can have a different pattern of muttons than the east.
Right.
But we haven't seen that pattern to approve it. We are agreeing to the new or the added window on the east, but we are not agreeing to the pattern of the muttons on the east.
That's my understanding.
Yes.
That's what we have here.
And we are approving the larger rectangular window as proposed.
As proposed,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Same application, different muttons.
We're here looking at industrial design.
Okay. I don't have, we could go on to the conversation, but I don't have the text of the others. Well, she's working on it.
Yeah, of which one? We have the song.
The other two, you mean the other two?
There are 2 other.
Yeah, I didn't have a problem with the other 2.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Yeah, I don't know if we have it in our, it was,
One is about maintenance.
yeah, maintenance in the awning color and cleanup of the awning. It didn't strike me as very controversial.
Yep, here you go. Item 6.
Okay. How's that?
The number 4, the applicant shall work with staff on the window muttons on the east and south elevations.
This is the south. This is already separate.
We have, we're suggesting condition number 5 would address the south.
Just condition number 5.
Yes, yes, so we separate those out.
Yep.
Okay, we good with those?
On the window.
Okay. How
Yep,
about
that works.
Okay, how about 6 and 7?
Yeah.
Everybody
6
okay
and
with-
7 are
everybody
fine with me.
I'm okay with those
Okay.
conditions.
All right.
I'm okay.
Okay, so now so those are all the conditions of the minor project review. So Do you want to just scroll up to one? It's the top so everybody sees it before we make a motion. Okay, so it's just the dumpster and then the ones we've been discussing. Okay, is there a motion to approve the minor project with the conditions listed?
I'll move to approve the minor project with the, is there six conditions now? 2, 3, yeah, with the six. Oh, 3's gone too, also, with the 5 conditions.
I can second that motion.
Mr. Jewell,
Yes.
Ms. Damaser,
Yes.
Mr. Alexander,
Yes.
Ms. Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. Cotter.
Yes.
Okay, the sign now.
Mr. Chairman, sorry, there's one more recommendation to approve with the master sign plan.
Yeah, that's what I said, the sign. We have to do with the sign, yeah. Okay, go ahead.
I think we just need a motion to approve.
Does anybody have any, or is there any discussion? Because there was a comment by Mr. Holton about the sign and, because the trellis, are you looking at the trellis system as a part of the sign?
It is not part of the calculation for the square footage, but it is part of their brand and identity for Fox in the Snow. So it's a part of it, but not included in the calculation.
Okay, so we've seen the sign presented. There's a motion for approval. Any feelings or discussion about it?
I don't have any, I don't have anything. I know it's part of their brand, and I know it does cover up with one of the historic element there, but it does say it's a reversible thing that can be done, can be taken down also. So I understand the concern, but I also don't have a major opposition to it.
Is, the trellis itself is adhering to the stone on the front.
Yeah, and historically, they wouldn't do that. That was really out of a conversation with staff as much as anything. I mean, normally, the Boston ivy is not super invasive as ivies go, and typically, they just let it grow up the masonry side of the buildings they're in and groom it around the box, and that's that. So if that's preferable, that's certainly, that's how they would typically do this. So the trellis is really not anything anyone feels, I don't think, strongly about one way or the other.
So can we remove it?
But you want the ability to grow landscape across, right?
Yeah.
And so actually a trellis is a better way to protect the building. If you're going to grow ivy up the face of a building, a trellis like this, which stands off from the face of the building, is a better way to preserve and protect the building than to let ivy grow across it, because you'll still be able to see the stone through this. And what I thought your system pointed out is you're mounting it to the mortar joints.
Correct.
You're not breaking the stone.
Correct.
And I think
It's as minor as we could get. It's stainless steel cable, so it's not, you say trellis, you tend to think of something that's more substantial. This is not.
Yeah, this system compared to what's on the library is a little more delicate and a little subtler than what the parking garage of the library.
It's certainly less intrusive than letting it grow on the stone.
Yes, grow on the stone.
Yeah, and it preserves you can see well, I don't know if eventually when the ivy grows prolifically, I don't know if you'll be able to see the stone, but you still get the image of the post office, and it's a classic post office look, as the speaker was saying. And I think with still being able to see it, and hopefully the reducing of the muttons, you'll still be able to see the frontage. That's important.
And I think the halo lighting will still also bring some of that stone out too.
Yes, I agree.
And in terms of the size of this, I know there was a question about that. The mural that has been approved for the Fairy Garden compared to this is enormous. So, and there has been the intent, I think, of part of the revision of the zoning was to have better signs and more creative and more decorative signs in the community. So I think this also meets the design intent of the sign changes. So I'm okay too. Okay, is there a motion to approve the master sign plan with the one condition?
So moved.
I'll second.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Ms. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Jewell?
Yes.
Mr. Cotter?
Yes.
Ms. Damisser?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, everybody okay? Do you need? Do we?
I'm going to get a little water. My legs
Okay.
start choking.
All right. I'll wait until you come back. Okay. Okay.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, while we're taking a little bit of a break, I just wanted to read into the record another public comment that we got for 143 South Riverview. This came in probably during the final debate, and I wasn't able to read it into the record. Since the decision's been made, advice of attorney is that it's okay to read it into the record right now. This is from Kate Vessels at 63 South Riverview Street. She says the staff need to be very clear about what they are needing from the homeowners prior to the formal ARB meetings. To come back and complain about not having certain documentation is not the homeowner's fault. The board needs to tell homeowners what is exactly needed before the meeting. They should be allowed to demolition this property. There is nothing special about this property. The ARB is reaching and oppressive to homeowners. I fully support Lindy's view. This is a very subjective process based on who is on the board at the given time.
Okay, thank you.
You should read that with all the members present.
Mr. Holton, that's what I was saying, is that advice from our attorney said that we could, since the decision had already been made on that.
Nonetheless,
I'm happy to read it again.
well, yes, but just because of the tone of the message. It's up to the chair.
Yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, feel
It-
free. I think
it-
it is
it's
sufficiently
fine.
on the record,
Yeah,
but
I mean, it's fine. I think just so that I think it's valuable. I think it's valuable that everybody hears it. So Sarah, if you wouldn't mind.
Not at all. All right. This is regarding the demolition request at 143 South Riverview Street from Kate Vessels. And she wrote, the staff need to be very clear about what they are needing from homeowners prior to the formal ARB meetings. To come back and complain about not having certain documentation is not the homeowner's fault. The board needs to tell homeowners what is exactly needed before the meeting. They should be allowed to demolition this property. There is nothing special about this property. The ARB is reaching and oppressive to homeowners. I fully support Lindy's view. This is a very subjective process based on who is on the board at the given time.
Thanks for doing that a second time. Okay, thank you for your patience, applicants, for item 4. This is the Dublin Arts Council at 7125 Riverside Drive. This is a minor project review. The application is a request for the reconstruction of a historic log cabin located to this site with associated site improvements on a approximately 5.9 acre site zoned restricted suburban residential. The new site is northwest of the intersection of Riverside Drive with Emerald Parkway. Ms. Holt will be our presenter. Looks like you're all set.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And indeed, this is the Dublin Arts Council Historic Log Cabin Project. The location is at the intersection of West Emerald, or just west of Emerald and Riverside, and this is an Appendix G property, meaning it's outside the historic district itself. The zoning is R1, which is restricted suburban residential. Little bit closer view, the city owns both properties and has done since 1999. The site location is the historic Crum home. It is built in 1941 and it's individually listed on the National Register. It's been the home of the Dublin Art Center since 2002. This cabin that we're talking about tonight was originally found during an extensive renovation project on Riverside Drive back in 2017. It was sited on part of the Thaddeus Kosciuszko land grant, and it dates from approximately 1820 to 1840. When the cabin was found during this demolition and renovation project, it was seen as something very unique, and therefore it was numbered. All the logs were numbered. It was disassembled, and it's been in storage ever since. City Council in August of 2021 unanimously agreed to relocate the cabin to the DAC property. And it specifically was meant to be a small event venue and provide an educational opportunity for visitors to the council property. This is the proposed site location for the cabin, just southwest of the main building. And the cabin uniquely originally sat on a slope site to accommodate a root cellar or basement. And the proposed siting here is specifically chosen to replicate that original placement. This project before you tonight is the first phase of a three-phase project to include more outdoor spaces and river access. And this site plan is just to give you a little bit of context about what is coming. But tonight, we are looking at the cabin relocation in this location, parking upgrades to add ADA spaces, and a pathway to the cabin and the historic root cellar that exists on the property. This is the proposed east elevation, or the front of the building. Again, the logs were conserved and numbered, and they will be reassembled from storage. The front porch is to be added, however, it is thought very likely that it had a front porch originally. The chinking will be restored or reinserted, if you will, per the NPS Preservation Brief number 26, which talks specifically about the repair and restoration of historic log buildings. The windows are Marvin Ultimate in 6/6 operable windows on the bottom, and fixed pane, just six pane fixed on the second floor. I'm sorry, it's been a long day. The door is custom made out of salvaged wood and hardware, and the lighting, the required code lighting, is hidden within the porch rafters, and I'll talk about that more with the materials. The north elevation shows a 12-12 roof pitch for the main part of the building. A 212 pitch for the porch which would be very typical. The chimney is made out of Ohio limestone, and then the chimney cap is hidden within the stone for a more authentic look. Public access is only to the main level, with staff only on the upper level and then in the cellar. The south elevation is on the left with the same materials and roof pitches and elements that we've discussed. The west elevation is on the right, showing that rear access with the same custom door and hardware treatment as on the front. This photo shows the proposed stone type and pattern that would be mimicked for the chimney. It also shows the typical front porch, similar to what will be added in this case. We see the hand-sawn red cedar shakes proposed for the roof. And then we have gutters that are half-round galvanized finish, and then the downspouts are round corrugated galvanized finish. And again, the windows are proposed to be Marvin Ultimate Series, which the board has approved previously. The main floor will be 6/6 double hung, operable. The upper floors will be 6-pane inoperable. And then the windows will be finished in gunmetal, which is the closest color to mimic weathered wood. Next is the metal door frame, also finished in gunmetal, and the door detail on the lower right. The front porch lighting will be a floodlight, but it will be hidden within the porch rafters. And again, this meets safety and code requirements. The rafters are 8 inches deep, whereas the light itself is 6 inches deep, so it can be tucked out of view within those rafters. The wall light that is shown here for the rear entry will be mounted inside the retaining wall, which is shown as a typical on the right-hand photo. And this was felt to be the least obtrusive to provide, again, that minimal lighting for employee access. This application is consistent with all criteria or not applicable to the final development plan criteria. Staff is recommending approval with a condition that bike parking shall be provided with Phase 2 approval and construction or within 2 years, whichever is sooner. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Anyone have any questions for Sarah? Okay. Is the applicant or present? Would you like to add to that?
Yes.
Sean Korwetsky, City of Dublin Landscape Architect Manager for Parks and Rec. I really don't have anything to add unless you have any questions.
Okay. And is there somebody else here?
We've got our architects, our builder and our landscape architect.
Okay.
Civil as well here.
Okay. Anybody have any questions? Okay.
It's a great project.
I think it's impressive.
Okay. All right. Is there have we had any public comment on this?
We had one comment from Paul Jelpy, who lives directly adjacent to the DAC, and he actually called me. His comment was a concern that the stone wall at the entry off of Riverside has never been completed, and that people drive onto the property during weekends and party directly next to his property. That wall is not a part of this project.
Okay. Has staff looked into, with the other parts of city government, into his concerns?
Sean and I talked about this.
Okay. We don't need to deal with it here because it's out of our purview. I just want to make sure his concern has been passed on to the appropriate parties. Okay.
Absolutely.
All right.
Yeah, we have discussed that internally and also with my director and stuff as well. So we'll take it with what it is and do whatever we deem is necessary from there.
Okay.
We did have one other thing to add, actually, and Tom had mentioned something just before the meeting that I think brings more historic significance to the cabin, and we're willing to move forward with it, but wanted to present that as well.
David Kaiser, DKD Architects. We've been working closely with Tom throughout the whole process, get to a design that was acceptable for everyone. But he presented me with this, and I'll pass this around, but a idea for the columns on the front porch. And I think it's a good idea. So his suggestion is that we replace the square columns that are shown in the drawings and renderings with round, more like log columns, and we would also remove the diagonal bracing. Let me show you. I'll pass this down. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I had one question earlier today that I forwarded to Sarah in our board. What kind of, I had questions looking at some of the details, like Tom brings up a point about the columns, and I was looking at things like rafter tails exposed, and would a cabin really have a soffit, or would you look up and see the underside of the roof sheathing when you looked up between the rafters, the rafter tails? So I was just curious about, well, I guess the goal. How authentic is the goal to just reuse the logs and reassemble them the way they were found? Because there are a lot of details we could talk about. We did not ask our consultant to do an analysis like both projects that were before you tonight went through the scrutiny of our consultant. So I was just kind of curious what the intent was when things were added, how close were you trying to get? I mean, I think it's clearly Tom sees something here that.
Sure. You're right. There was a bit of a balancing act to do. We had to certainly address some modern building code issues that we've actually kind of hopefully come to some agreements on with the building department as far as relief of the building code. One of those is the placement of, egress lighting on that rear lower level door. Code would require a battery pack that would be, sort of wall mounted above there. And so there are a number of issues that we've, kind of worked through. Obviously the windows, we work very closely with staff to try and find a good balance between what will be, a good product for maintenance and a good product for historically accurate kind of detailing. So that's kind of how we came. But in general, the rest of the, the porch details, the logs themselves, the casings around windows, those are all done to be historically accurate. So there is some kind of, give and take. Obviously you wouldn't find gutters on a building like this, but we just felt like it's not a good, recommendation for the city to own a building that doesn't have gutters on it. So we use the half round in lieu of anything else because it looks a little bit more period, even though it isn't. So yes.
How about, and this is a little different because we are all your clients. This is different than the other projects because we're all residents here. So, and I would not make this a condition of approval, and I'm not going to belabor this, but when I looked at like the way the floors were framed and the way the roof is framed, are you using conventional lumber, dimensioned lumber for that?
One of the things we've had to agree on with the building department was 100 pounds per square foot live load on the first floor. That's the requirement for an assembly building.
Okay.
It's way beyond what this would have ever been built. So our foundations are much heftier. The first floor is all framed in LVLs. And so there's kind of this hidden modernization that's obviously occurring to make this a publicly
I was,
operable building.
you know, I was thinking when you look up from that first floor and you look at the ceiling, you'd probably have heavy timber and you'd probably have them spaced further apart and then have a planking.
We are doing exactly that.
Okay, good, because I couldn't tell. You said that I didn't see the
There's
framing
modern
drawing.
framing hidden all.
I didn't see the
behind
framing
all of
drawing in there. You had a lot of drawings. It was a nice presentation, but at least my packet, and maybe I,
Yeah, we have false beams
okay,
that are shown. So underneath the, the modern structure of the floor framing, we will put planking so it'll look, and then there will be false, what would look like, old floor joists, and they're spaced more like they would be, in modern times. So yeah, we've gone to great lengths to the stair is another detail that we've been working back and forth with building department on, because the 4-inch ball issue that would never been built like that. So a little bit of give and take on both sides.
all right. I think,
I'll add to that just in the fact that we're trying to make it as authentic as we can within obviously current codes and what they allow, so that it's an assembly space for people to come in and see. Hopefully in the future, we'll put furniture in there so people actually will understand how the cabin at one time was lived. So that's the end goal. We want to get it as accurate as we can. I know the Orr Brothers structural erectors are looking for replacement logs, or they may have already found replacement logs to fill in some of the holes, because in the old condition where it was in the house, they actually cut through walls for doors and stuff. So we have to rebuild all that and bring it back to what it was. So
all right, good,
just wanted to add that.
good, okay. Any other? Okay. Do we need to modify the submission if we're going to incorporate the column that was suggested by Mr. Holt?
We can certainly add a condition to memorialize that.
To give them the flexibility to incorporate that column. And so it's open, we can approve what was submitted. And then if there's some issue that makes it difficult to incorporate that, they have the flexibility.
What was submitted and give them the option of including this alternative.
Yeah, perhaps I wasn't clear. Yeah, that was my intent, but I'm maybe delirious.
Joyce, the posts that go
Oops.
See what you think of that.
I'm fine with that.
Yep.
Okay. Okay, is there a motion to approve with the two conditions?
I'll make a motion to approve the recommendations for the two different conditions for the minor project.
Is there a second?
I'll second the approval of the minor project with the two conditions.
Ms. Damaser?
Yes.
Mr. Cotter?
Yes.
Mr. Alexander?
Yes.
Ms. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Jewell?
Yes.
Thank you for your patience. We probably should have had you first on the agenda tonight. My apologies.
We're used to it.
Okay, all right. All right. Sir, do we have any communications?
I have a whole bunch of items, but I'll work through them quickly. The penalty code update, if you remember from last year, is finally making its way to City Council on the 23rd of May. So an update on that.
For the new members on our board, because I don't think they're familiar with that, there's a penalty clause for not following the guidelines. And so it's been updated to put more teeth into that clause. So that's what Sarah's referring to.
Like if you tear down your chicken coop.
Exactly.
Exactly, yes. I also wanted to share that there are new ARB submittal checklists on the website, which have a little bit greater clarity, include the full range of all of the projects, and match our new code. So those are on the website now. Let's see. The rules and regulations have been updated and adopted by City Council last Monday. These were heard in February of this year, and they have also been added to your OneDrive so you have access to that new language. In front of you is a really fabulous project. This is some information about what's called the Remembrance Project. There are 3 QR codes at the Dublin Cemetery where people can scan and have access to information about veterans that are buried within the cemetery. And this is a really fun, interesting, and wonderfully honoring project for the cemetery and our veterans. And then finally, just as kind of a little FYI, and so everybody can keep their fingers and toes crossed, we are applying for 2 Ohio SHPO awards, one for the code and the guidelines as a suite of tools that we use in the district and Appendix G, and then one for our outreach documents, which we have implemented this past January, including the annual mailer and then the welcome flyer that people get in the district.
Good for you taking that initiative. That's great. Yeah, that's great.
Fingers crossed. And beyond that, I have nothing else.
All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion that we adjourn.
And I think it's unanimous. Okay. All right. Are we off the air yet?
Our meeting next month is